Well, Kate, I'm so excited to chat with you today. So, I want to go ahead and get things started and just have you share with everyone a little bit more about you and how you got started, on your health and wellness journey, being a registered dietitian, and I know you're a personal trainer too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great to be here, Erica. And yeah, even thinking about my story, I'm like, okay, there's a lot to dissect, so I'm gonna make it quick. But yeah, I am a registered dietitian and a personal trainer, and then I also work as a nutrition specialist for Nordic Naturals. So it's been really interesting to dive into like the supplement world, whereas before I was a little weary of it, but now I can see like how beneficial it is for people. But my journey really started. I was fortunate enough in high school, I had a great guidance counselor, college guidance counselor, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I thought she asked me the most interesting question. She's like, when you go to an airport or you're getting a magazine, what do you gravitate towards? I'm like, oh, like always, the health and fitness magazines. She was like, okay. And when you open that magazine, what are the first articles you want to read? I'm like, oh, it's always the nutrition ones. She was like, would you want to do that as a career? I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So then actually from there, that started looking at colleges that offered nutrition programs, landed at Virginia Tech, which has a fabulous program. I can't speak to it enough. And then when I graduated, I had to do my dietetic internship. I ended up getting my master's in nutrition as well during that time. And then I was working as the wellness director for a YMCA. And that's when I was seeing clients and having to refer out for personal training and realized that I really wanted to be that one person for them and that one point of contact. So that led me to get my personal training cert. And then actually after that, I ended up going to Italy for a culinary program. I was doing a lot of culinary and cooking demos at the time, and had the confidence to do them, but really wanted the formal education behind it and, would love to go to Italy. And I was at a time in my life where I had a little break before we were moving to the West Coast. So I went to Italy for a few months and was able to get my culinary certification and then ended up at Nordic Naturals when we moved out to California.
Wonderful. I love your story. I love that you got to go to Italy and do
Oh,
culinary there.
yeah.
That sounds amazing. I'm
It
not a
was
chef, but
amazing.
I would love to go do that.
Yeah, no, it was great. They had a really big focus on the Mediterranean diet, and we were in a really small town. We were in Calabria, Italy, so a really small town. It was an amazing experience.
Oh, it sounds like it. Yeah. Someday we'll get over there. It's on my list.
Yes, you will. They do have 2-week programs as well, like shorter programs that you can just go for fun. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. I wish I could do it all over again, but
Yeah. Well,
happiness
someday
is
after all this stuff blows over, you can go do it again someday, right?
exactly in retirement, right?
Yes, totally. Okay, Kate, let's go ahead and dive in and start talking about a topic that I like can geek out in. I know a
Mhm.
lot, but I know you know even more. And that is talking about omegas, the importance of them, the power of them. And let's have you start there, and then I'll go more specific.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, obviously, especially joining Nordic Naturals a few years ago, I myself, knew about the importance of omega-3s, but didn't know the intricacies of really everything they do for us. And it definitely amped my intake of them. But we'll kind of start with why they're so important, the issue and why people are deficient, and then kind of, what you can do about it. So omega-3s really are at the foundation of our health. And I say that because they really help dictate the health of our cells. And how healthy your cells are, I'm going to venture to say, is really how healthy you are. So what most people don't realize is that while omega-3s have all these benefits for a healthy inflammatory response, you can think of, when we talk about omega-3s, we're really talking about EPA and DHA, which are the omega-3s you want. And, DHA you can think of supports from the neck up. So your brain health, your eye health, including like memory and learning. And then EPA you can think of as neck down. So heart health, your joint health, mood, and then also your immune system, which a lot of people don't realize they can actually enhance the function of your immune cells, which is very important to us right now. So even though they do all these things, one of the biggest benefits of omega-3s is, we're going to get a little sciencey right now. And I know, I'm sure you're going to love this, Erica, if you said you're already geeking out on it. But so surrounding all of our cells, we have a cell membrane, and that cell membrane is made up of fat. And it's essentially made up of the fat that you're generally eating. So if you're eating a diet high in saturated fats and processed foods, things like that, the cell membrane becomes really rigid. So what happens there is a lot of nutrients can't get into your cells, and your cells also can't push like some unwanted waste out. Whereas omega-3s, what they do is they actually make that cell membrane really fluid. So it allows other beneficial nutrients to get into your cells and push some of like the unwanted waste that you don't want in your cells out. So the way we connect that to real life and take the science of that is, I like to think of it as, whether you're taking other supplements or you're just trying to eat a healthy diet, I mean, we're not doing it for nothing. We want those nutrients to get into our cells and make us healthier and make our bodies function better. So to me, if you're taking any supplement or you're just trying to eat a healthy diet, take an omega-3 each day just to help get those nutrients into your cells, plus all their other benefits, right? Like then they have all these other benefits. But to me, that's really when we talk about like foundational health, it's such a foundational nutrient for that, that fact of it.
Hey, I want to stop you real quick.
Yeah. Always stop me.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you mentioned the cellular uptake, because that is so important. Like when you mention like how healthy our cells are is how healthy we are. I mean, that is truth there. So doing what we can to improve our cellular health is extremely powerful. So I love that explanation. It was so wonderful. So I want to ask you, because you mentioned how omega-3s can help with our immune system. Yeah. So is that, well, I'm sure it's a twofold. I'm sure it's not just one or the other. And so you talked about the cellular part of it. Can you speak to how omegas can positively impact our gut health? And I'm sure that this also has to do with the lining, the mucosal barrier of our gut. Yeah.
So with healthy fats in general, but particularly omega-3s, it's exactly what you just said, Erica, is that it can help that mucosal lining of our gut. And that's where taking a probiotic with your omegas, they work so great together if you are having any type of gut issue. And then in terms of immunity, they really just can help enhance the function of our immune cells. Which also taking a probiotic is going to help do the same thing and help increase your immunity as well. Because most people don't realize like 70% of your immune system lives in your gut. So if you have an unhealthy gut, or you're not eating the right foods to support your gut, or taking, supplements to help your gut heal, it's really going to have a large impact on your immune system, which, I mean, like we keep saying, so important right now. Everyone's looking for immune health and how, ways to boost it. But that's really going to be where omega-3s can help be one of those support nutrients. And also with helping, again, that healthy inflammatory response, which, if your gut, if you're having any types of inflammation there, that's where it's going to help support that as well.
So do you have a recommendation on like dosage? Because I know my ladies are going to ask, Erica, how much should we be taking? And okay, I have this is a twofold question, because there's also DHA, EPA, and I feel like this has shifted a little bit over the years. It used to be like DHA should be higher, or DHA needs to be higher, especially when we're talking at all in the years of having babies, right? Because of brain development. But more recent, I've heard that maybe they should just be more balanced, or it's okay if EPA is a little bit higher, right? So there's like the makeup of the two as well as like the total amount.
Yes, no, and it is the reason why your question is so complicated and there's so many layers to it is because the answer is the same way.
Okay.
So with dosage, unfortunately, like more and more research is still coming out with like what's the right dose, but it is very individual. So I do try and encourage people. There are so many at-home tests where you really just prick your finger and you can test your omega-3 levels, because some people just naturally have higher levels than others. So it's really important first, if you want to know the exact specific dose for yourself, that is the best way. But in terms of research, it's mixed. At minimum 500 milligrams a day. I personally think closer to 1,000 or more, but again, that's where it is important to get tested and really find out what's best for you. Now, in terms of like childbearing years, you are right, it does change. So for women, when they're thinking about conceiving and then also during pregnancy, DHA is the prominent omega-3 they want, because it's really there to help support the baby's nervous system development, their eye development, brain development. And then also there's a lot of research behind women when they actually give birth. If their DHA stores are low, it can lead to other like mood complications and disturbances. So that's where during that time, DHA is the number one omega-3 that you want. But then once you have your baby and you're in this postpartum phase, EPA really helps support mood. So you still want that DHA, and this is where more of, that balance may come in. Maybe you take a little bit higher of an EPA, but balance is great there because you still need the DHA to support, first of all, both your own brain and eye health, right? We're always just thinking about the baby after the baby's born. But then also too, if you're breastfeeding, they're taking from your DHA stores. And then you want that EPA for your mood health. And also too, right, we talked about for joint health, for heart health, for your immune system. So that's where that balance is better, or like a little bit of a higher EPA supplement is better during that time. Or if you find in general, you have, some mood disturbances, or you don't find you have a healthy mood, taking in a higher dose of EPA along with DHA could be, your best route as well.
Yeah. So the easiest thing is just making sure that the fish oil you are taking, one, is good quality, and two, has a balance of DHA and EPA, because I know you can buy now for pregnancy, like just a DHA supplement, which again, I'm like you said, is fine, but I wouldn't neglect the EPA. So that's like for the most bang for your buck, just go get a good supplement that has both, right? And I know you mentioned too, like, so after you have a baby, and we talk about depletion quite a bit on the podcast, it comes up a lot, but this is a big one. And I'm very passionate about this personally because I was very diligent with all of my babies at taking, I just took up straight up cod liver oil when I was pregnant, put it on a spoon, and people will look at me like, you are nuts. How did you even follow? I did it because I was like, I knew the power of it. And my youngest is almost 9. So it's been a while since I've had my baby. But I think the thing that then, and I feel like I did this after my third, I think I forgot to, after she was born, right? Like, I think I didn't do as good of a job at taking my fish oil like I did with my first 2 postpartum, because you're going to have a third kid and life gets busy. And what happens once you've had a third child? You are that much more depleted. So it's like, we have to work so hard. And I'm always trying to get this message across to my moms that are always like, oh, but I have a 5-year-old, or I have a 12-year-old is my youngest. And I'm like, yes, but you could be depleted, that you still haven't restored your depletion. And so this is a really big one. And it's not only, like you said, just for the baby, but it's really for mom herself. And I know you mentioned, like, obviously all the big ones in heart and immune and all that. Yeah. Are you seeing, or is there studies showing correlations between prevention for like dementia and Alzheimer's at all with making sure that you have good omega stores in your body?
So more so, there's more studies to support the benefits of omega-3s in terms of, we're going to say like those mood
Okay.
disturbances, more so anxiety, things like that. But you're supporting your brain health no matter what by taking them.
Right.
So I'm sure, I can't say the research is definitive there, but you are like, if we think about our brain too, so our brain is made up of 60% fat, and 25% of the fat in your brain is DHA alone. And most people, if we talk about just like how you're getting it, most people, some people may say, well, I eat fish 3 times a week. Well, like, one, are you eating fatty fish? Is like one question. Then the other part is, that's still not your daily dose of omega-3s. And that's what I try to get across to people. Even like you were just saying, Erica, of like replenishing those stores, you want to get a daily intake of omega-3s to keep up those stores rather than just, in reality, you would have to eat about a 3 to 6 ounce, let's say, piece of salmon, because there's your fatty fish, each day, versus taking, an omega-3 supplement from a good quality source, and you don't have to worry about mercury levels and all those things to get that daily dose. Which that's another thing too that comes up, is in terms of quality. I can't tell you how many people I hear from like, oh, I can't take an omega-3 supplement, especially when they're pregnant. It gave me fishy burps, or it smelled bad, or it tasted bad. And what people don't realize is that means it's rancid. That means it's not a good quality. You should never have a fishy burp from your fish oil. It should never smell bad. It should never taste like fish. And so that's a big thing too, is finding an omega-3 supplement, or if you're like, oh, I just listened to this podcast, you know what, I have some omega-3 supplements in my cabinet from years ago. Smell it first, because what happens too is, don't just take it, smell it first. And then, because what happens is when fish oil is rancid, it has a negative effect on your health. It can actually increase your cholesterol levels. So you have to be really diligent in terms of picking a good quality one. Another piece there too is looking for one that's in the triglyceride form. And usually it'll say it like right on the bottle, because if the company's honestly spending the money to put it back into the triglyceride form, they're going to put it front and center on their label. But that's another piece to it in terms of absorption and actually absorbing the amount of omega-3s that it says on your bottle. Because the other way fish oil companies, or companies that sell fish oil, put their form in it is a synthetic form called an ethyl ester form. And it's not like, we don't eat fats that are in an ethyl ester form. We eat fats that are in a triglyceride form. So when it's in that ethyl ester form, your body doesn't recognize it as well, and we just don't absorb as much. So always looking for a triglyceride form, and then never any like fishy smell, fishy burps, anything like that.
Thank you for sharing all those tips. Yeah, I actually, a while back, I had found an old bottle of fish oils, and they were a really good quality one too. And I opened it and I was like, oh, these are bad. They do go bad. So that's one of those you don't want to stock up and order a lot. You want to just order it, take it. Order it, take it. You just have to.
Yeah, order as needed, for sure.
Giving it to your kids. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, 110%. Especially too with DHA. I mean, the amount of studies out there that have shown the improvement in cognitive function, and then also like visual acuity too, and language skills, is outrageous. So obviously when they're infants, that's a good time. In terms of dosing, anywhere from like 500 milligrams to 800 milligrams as they get a little bit older is a great place to start. And then, I mean, honestly, that's like having them take it for the rest of their life. I will say DHA can be a bit more important in the beginning there for kids. But then as they get older, like we were talking about, finding that balance and having both the EPA and DHA there. One story I always talk about is my sister her daughter's 2.5 now. And I was always adamant about my sister taking her DHA while she was pregnant. And then once she had her baby, continuing to take an EPA DHA formula for herself and then DHA for her daughter, Harper. And my sister and my brother-in-law were like, where did this girl come from? Like, she's so smart. She didn't come from us. She's outsmarting us. And she's like 1.5. What's going on? And so my sister kept threatening to like not give her DHA anymore, which she didn't. She was, still a good mom and gave it to her. But you really can see it like anecdotally as well. But the research there's so much research there to back it up. And it's something you can, easily do for your kids and for yourself, just to support, again, like for moms, really that postpartum part with mood. And then kids as they're growing up, just with their brain development and, like we were talking about their visual acuity and things like that.
So I have a question on, and this goes back to dosage. So I know you may not have a specific answer, but occasionally over the years, I've heard of people taking really high dose fish oil, and specifically if we're talking about mood and anxiety and all of that, and again, I always recommend everyone talk to their doctor, do your own research as well. But for because we have a lot of women that have anxiety. I mean, that just seems to kind of be, especially with what's going on nowadays, there's just so much more stress and all that. So is it possible to take too much, or what's kind of that higher limit if someone was say, hey, I want to test the waters with maybe seeing if I doubled my dose and I took 2,000, 3, or even 4,000, is that going to benefit me, or is there harm in doing it?
You shouldn't have, especially with like a 2,000 milligram dose or 4,000 milligrams, you really shouldn't have issues, because even 4,000 milligrams, that's what they recommend for anyone with any type of if you're having cholesterol issues or any type of heart issues, that's actually the recommendation. The only risk that is still, it's been debated for years, and I don't know if you're aware, Erica, but a bleeding risk of taking too much and increasing your risk of bleeding. But like I said, it's been debated for years. We personally, as a company, don't support that finding because the research is just lacking there. But obviously too, if you take a high dose and you find that you're, bleeding more, or you talk to your doctor and they're concerned about it, don't. But if you're talking about 4,000 milligrams, I mean, even I know some people that take up to 8,000 milligrams a day, and they find that's really supportive for them, you really shouldn't have any issues. But always, that's again, where talk to your doctor. Do one of the at-home testing kits, or have your doctor do it, and find out where you're at first, because it's also really eye-opening too. But I would first find out where you're at, because maybe you're not as deficient as you think, and you only need to take, which also we don't want to take a lot of supplements, right? It's not fun to take a lot of pills. So find out where you're at. So maybe you only have to take 1 or 2 capsules versus you're like, oh, I'm going to take 4 just to make sure and support it. But first start with getting tested and then go from there. But you're fine. Like I said, I know plenty of people that take up to 8,000 milligrams a day and don't see any negative effects.
Okay. I was just curious that, because I know it comes from time to time,
but also too, that's where that, taking a good quality fish oil supplement comes into play. Because if you're taking one of those rancid ones and you're taking close to 4,000 milligrams, I can't say that won't negatively affect your health.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're getting quality too, and say you have been taking a not quality brand and you switch to a quality, taking 1,000 milligrams might just change your life.
Exactly.
Okay. Because could you know offhand what, I know you mentioned the test, you can just prick your finger. Is it an at-home kit that people can order on their own, or do you have to?
It's an at-home kit that you can take. There's 2, one guy, Doug Bebis, has one, and I want to say it's just omega-3 testing kit. And then the other one, I may have to send it to you, Erica, to put in
Yeah,
the
I'll
show
put the
notes.
links in it.
But there's another one. Oh, I'm blanking on his name right now. But if you even just Google omega-3 tests, there's really only like 2 or 3 big ones that will like send it to you at home. You basically prick your finger, send it back. It's really easy. I just did one about a year ago.
Okay.
And it's really easy to
Is it
do.
pretty accurate? Because if you're just taking like a screenshot of where you are that day, is it pretty stable? Is it one of those that can change? You know what I mean? Like if I took fish oils last night and I were to test it today, is it going to be higher than a day that I say don't take fish oils?
So I would definitely get tested at a time that's realistic to what you're doing now. So if
Okay.
you're listening to this right now and you don't take fish oil, get tested now while you're not taking it. So you can know that baseline. I mean, you can start taking it right after you get tested just to start getting ahead on it. But if you're consistently, Erica, like most days taking your fish oil, it's not going to matter too much if you take it
Gotcha.
like
Okay.
that next morning, or because you'll be able to store some of it.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is for, I know vegans out there that,
Yeah.
fish oil's like, well, I don't want to take fish oil because it comes from fish. So
Mhm.
what can I take instead?
So in reality, where even fish, right, like where they're getting their EPA and DHA from is from algae. So you can take an algae oil. So that's a really clean and easy way for vegans and vegetarians or people who just don't consume fish to get their omega-3s. But what's really important here is, and I wish we could get everything from food, but just with how our food system has changed, and then also just like the interactions with different nutrients within food, some, block absorption of others. And one of the things here is that a lot of people think they can get their omega-3s from plant-based sources like flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, right? You see it everywhere, like, oh, high in omega-3s. And you don't want to rely on those. And the reason being is they're in the ALA form. And we want EPA and DHA. And ALA can be converted into EPA and DHA, but the conversion rate is 1 to 5%. So one visual we like to use just to, have people really visualize what they would have to consume is getting 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA, like taking one capsule, is equivalent to eating a 10-ounce bag of flax or chia seeds because that conversion rate is so low. So you really don't want to rely, like if you are, if you're a non-fish eater or you're vegan or vegetarian, take an algae oil. You don't want to rely on getting your omega-3s from nuts and seeds because, again, with that conversion rate being so low, you're not going to actually get that much EPA and DHA in your system.
Thank you for sharing that. So question then, for those of us that
Yeah.
are okay with taking, fish oil, would we benefit more from taking algae oil or alternating, or
one's not going to benefit you more because by the time you actually do the processing, it's really just like that EPA and DHA in there. It's more so how concentrated you want your fish oil or EPA and DHA amount to be. So sometimes you'll find that some algae oils they're just in their natural form. So they may be less concentrated and have less EPA and less DHA, or you have to take more capsules, right, to get your 1,000 milligrams or 2,000 milligrams. But both of them, it's really just going to come down to having EPA and DHA in them. So there's not really a benefit to one or the other.
okay, so
more so preference.
Yeah. So it's not bad to do like flaxseed and all that, but it's not something we rely on for our omegas.
Exactly. Like I am not here to demonize. I mean, I eat chia seeds probably every day. I love them, but I love them for fiber, right? And they have some protein to them. So not here to demonize any type of, nuts or seeds. But if that's where you're getting your omega-3s from, and that is your main source, I highly recommend that you take an EPA and DHA source, like an algae oil, just because that conversion rate is so low and it's just so unrealistic to be able to get the EPA and DHA that you need from nuts and seeds. but still eat them for all their other benefits.
Right.
Yeah, just not for the omega, just not for the omega-3 benefits. I mean, you'll still get some from it, but just not the amount that research has shown that we really need to help support our body. One of the biggest issues there too is like, so with omega-3s, two of the issues is, one is that 90% of Americans are deficient in omega-3s. And reason being, it's hard to get it from our diet. If you're not eating fish every day, and if you're, like we just talked about, if you're relying on nuts and seeds to get your EPA and DHA, it just makes it hard. And then the other part of that is this omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So omega-6 fats are more inflammatory fats. We need them for, when you fall and cut yourself, we do need them for that process. So we need some, but we don't need a lot. And what's happened is, ideally, they say our ratio should be about 1-to-1, but even if we can have like a 4-to-1 ratio of omega-6 fats to omega-3s, we're okay. But right now we're at like a 20-to-1.
Can you
And
give
what
some
that
examples of what omega-6s are for everyone
exactly.
listening?
And I'm even going to talk about, Erica, one thing that people don't realize, like, we're going to talk about the healthy examples too that are rich in omega-6. So we want to try and bring that lower. And the way to do that is, yes, hope to reduce some of our omega-6 fat intake, but also if we increase our omega-3 intake, we can help balance out that ratio. So omega-6 foods, processed foods, sweets, all kind of like, we think of like the unhealthy foods. Yes, a lot of them are rich in omega-6, like our cooking oils and things like that. But what people don't realize is even our healthy foods have omega-6 fats. So like your chicken, your eggs, chickpeas have it. So your hummus, avocados have omega-6s. Also, I think it's really interesting. A lot of people eat walnuts for their omega-3 fats. Walnuts are higher in omega-6 fats than they are in omega-3s. So it's all these healthy foods too. So even for myself personally, I eat like a generally pretty balanced, healthy diet, but I take my omega-3s because like I love my avocados. I love my hummus. Like I eat chicken, I eat eggs most mornings. Like I know I'm eating, even though they're not, the processed side of omega-6 fatty foods, there's still those healthy foods that carry a lot of omega-6 fats, and we just need to like help balance out that ratio.
Yeah, so it's about balance. It's not about not eating those healthy foods.
It's just about
balancing them. Yeah.
Like the way I like to look at it is, instead of, and this is always with clients too, instead of taking things away, I want to add things. So instead of saying like, oh, let's take away all, which yes, if you're eating a lot of processed foods, let's take a bit of those away. But instead of taking away like those omega-6 rich foods, which are also healthy and other, they have a lot of other health benefits, let's just add omega-3s to balance out that ratio, which everyone's always happier to add things to their diet than take things away.
Oh no, I can't have this anymore. And it's like, especially healthy food. We don't want to take away healthy food.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's already challenging enough some days.
I agree.
Are there any other food sources that are high in omega-3s, just from like an awareness for people to be able, that you recommend, that are quality to, I mean, again, not to say we shouldn't be taking I agree. Everybody should be taking the omega-3 fish oils and things, or algae oil, right? But if we look at the rest of our diet, right, to just help our balance, right? What are some other recommendations from a healthy food source that are also, besides fish? We know salmon obviously is a really big one.
So also sardines, anchovies. So I even like to, I'll make like a good Caesar dressing, and every time I put in like, any type of like anchovy paste in there, right? Like always thinking of it that way. But sardines, anchovy, cod. So some wild cod is a great one. And then it's tough. And this is where like the fish part is tough, because like mackerel and herring are, they're high in omega-3s, but people just aren't eating those as much.
Yeah.
Salmon and cod are probably the two that people eat the most, but sardines and anchovies are really high in omega-3s as well. And that's where I tell people like, hey, if it's a day and you find you're eating those foods, like, okay, there's your daily dose of omega-3s that day. Maybe you just take supplements on the days that you're not eating that fatty fish. And then for vegans or vegetarians or people that aren't eating fish, algae oil really is their main source.
Okay.
In terms of like a good quality marine source. But that's where you really just have to look at your diet and think like, yeah, if you're having, salmon or cod 3 or 4 times a week, totally fine on those days you have it. If you don't want to take your fish oil pills, that's fine. But just making sure that each day you're getting in a source of omega-3s, whether that's from a supplement, whether that's from a food. But I do find it is tough in terms of fish, and the fish that have the highest amount of omega-3s, they're just not as common, except for maybe salmon and cod, that people are eating those each day. I mean,
we have to watch our fish intake sometimes, depending on
it's mercury.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm not a fan of farm raised fish because a lot of times they have antibiotics and they add dye and all that stuff. And even now with our, our wild caught, I think like there's companies out there that test it and do all that, which can be great as well. If you are eating a lot of fish, that would be something to look into so you can make sure you're getting sources of good quality fish. And I do find too, when you eat good quality healthy food, like you don't eat as much. I really that's my my husband and I say that all the time. We're like, we've over the years slowly just eaten healthy. We have our moments too, but for the most part, and we're just like, when you really eat good quality healthy food, you just don't eat as much, except for kids. Kids eat a lot of food. Oh my goodness. That is an exception. They eat a lot of food.
I'm sure, Erica, you find too, you don't eat as much because you're more satisfied because it tastes better. Like that's one thing I always am telling people, like eat the better quality. Yeah, it's got the nutrition benefits, right? It's probably ethically more sustainable, but it tastes better. Like, that's why a lot of us are eating food too. It's for the enjoyment factor. So I love that you said that it, you guys, you don't eat as much of it because you're more satisfied from it. And that's something to think about too, is like when we talk about mercury, unfortunately, where a lot of mercury lives in fish is in the fatty parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's where it's tough too, because it's this fatty cold water fish, which again, if you're eating it a few times a week, you should be fine. But that's where it's not as safe to eat the fatty fish every single day to get that daily dose. Because if you're getting your mercury levels tested, fine, but it's tough even with good quality wild caught fish, right? Yeah. So
I would eat wild caught salmon every day if I could. I love it.
Oh my God, I know.
It's I love it. I can eat that. So my favorite. Okay, Kate, is there anything else that we haven't talked about yet that you just are dying to share with everyone?
In terms of, omega-3s, I think we really hit the nail on the head there, and we were able to go through everything again, just remembering quality. But I know, Erica, we talked about before, if you want me to touch on other nutrients to help support a plant-based.
Let's go ahead. Let's talk a little about that. We did mention about so for those that are vegan and vegetarian, and I know we already talked about the omegas, which I think is really important. So do you have other recommendations for our vegans and vegetarians from a nutrient perspective?
Yeah. So the biggest one, we already talked about omega-3, so taking algae supplement is great there, but B12 is a big one, especially if you're vegan. If you are a vegetarian and you eat eggs, or, you do eat some animal sources, you may be getting enough, but always having a little B12 boost doesn't hurt anyone. But if you're vegan, 110%, you need to be on a B12 supplement. Things to think about there is you want to make sure in terms of the form that you're taking a methylcobalamin versus a cyanocobalamin, which is the synthetic form, and isn't as well absorbed by the body. And then aiming for about 250 micrograms. So usually what I actually recommend for people is to take a B complex instead of just a sole B12, because then you're getting all the other B vitamins to help support energy production. A really big one is for your metabolism, which I'm sure all your listeners will love to hear. So that's usually what I would recommend. Another thing to look for with a B complex, though, is make sure that there's a methylated folate in there versus a folic acid. That's also very important when you're looking for a prenatal vitamin, which actually something really quick to note. When you are looking at your prenatal vitamin, anyone listening, usually there's not that much DHA in there. Just backtracking really quick to fish oil, there's usually not that much DHA in there. So you usually have to supplement outside of it. So just keep an eye out for that, because I know a lot of people, the front of the package will say like there's DHA in it, and they get all excited and they're like, oh, I finally found a prenatal with DHA. But it's like, I've seen
milligrams usually.
Yeah, exactly. It's 200 milligrams. You don't even know what the sourcing is.
Fat total with a fish oil. So just take your separate fish oil, omega.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now I'll get back. Sorry, I had to backtrack there for a second. So yeah, taking a B complex. You can also take a standalone B12, but it's like, why not take B complex and get the other B vitamins in case you're lacking there as well. Iron is another big one. Iron and zinc, actually, I'll combine because they both run into the issue of, so with iron and zinc, a lot of the times, like a vegan diet or vegetarian diet is really high in phytates, which are in like our grains, our legumes, can be in our nuts or seeds, our, tofu, things like that. And so what can happen is by blocking, having a diet rich in that can block the absorption of iron and zinc. And, iron, we hear about, iron deficiency anemia. So we want to really watch out for that. Also, if you're starting to feel like really sluggish, your energy levels are low, it's definitely a great time to get your iron levels checked. And then for zinc, especially now, it's really there to help support your immune system. So we want to make sure that we're getting enough zinc in, if you're not able to get it from your diet, especially if you are a vegan. And then for most vegetarians, I highly recommend taking a zinc supplement, usually aiming for like a zinc glycinate supplement in terms of form for absorption. Because there are ways like you can decrease the phytate content of your foods by like soaking your legumes before and soaking your nuts and seeds and things like that. And using sprouted grains, which it all helps, but not enough to really make sure that your zinc stores are where they should be at. And then the last one is calcium. And yes, a lot of plant foods have calcium. Spinach is one of the big ones, but another issue there is that spinach also contains oxalates, which make it harder for your body to absorb calcium. So if you're planning on, getting most of your calcium from dark leafy greens, you can also get it from almonds, and tofu, and, other various forms of soybeans like tempeh and things like that. You just want to watch that you're not just mainly getting it from those high oxalate foods as well, which can make it tougher for your body to absorb calcium. So all in all, omega-3s, right? Taking algae oil, getting some B12, which I recommend taking a B complex in the form of that, iron, zinc supplement, and I highly recommend a zinc glycinate supplement, and calcium. Definitely talk to your doctor before taking anything, especially with iron, because if you take too much iron, it can actually cause constipation, which none of us want. So you just want to make sure that you're taking the right amount and that maybe your doctor is monitoring it a bit too and can help you through it.
Yeah, it's a good idea to get levels checked, because I also know with zinc too, right? We also have to look at copper as well, like a little bit of that balance. And so it is most important with a lot of those nutrients to discuss with your doctor, get, blood work done, just to check in with where all your levels are, for sure. Because
we don't realize, like, even, if you're eating a lot of produce rich foods, but also foods coming from the ground that are great for us health wise, a lot of the soil too, can it be heavy metals in there? And it's so important if you can, like, unfortunately, when you go to get blood work done, vitamin D is not even on there, which is also really important for your mood postpartum and in general with your immunity. But unfortunately, a lot of the things we're talking about today and those nutrients aren't going to be on your normal blood panel. So you have to advocate for yourself and ask your doctor to put them on, the next time you're getting blood work done, and put them on that blood work panel so you can just see where you're at and go from there.
Yeah. And one just last thing I want to ask you about iron,
Yeah.
which one day I want to do a whole episode on iron, because iron is a very gray area. I think there's so much out there that like is just not talked about enough. Because like for me personally, I never was anemic with 3 pregnancies. And then after my mold exposure, and I had this whole toxicity load in my body, I became very anemic. Like my ferritin, my iron was just plummeted, right? And the doctor tried to say, oh, well, your iron's low, that's why you feel so fatigued. I'm like, no. I knew, because I know my body. This is why I'm always trying to preach to everyone, like, you have to be your best advocate for yourself. Because if you can go through pregnancies and never be anemic, and then all of a sudden one day you are, that's a question. Like, why are you now anemic? Why are you now low in these things that previously weren't? Maybe you have a toxin load in your body. It could be heavy metals, like there's these different things. And 2, I think one thing that goes wrong with iron is that women are encouraged to get a high dose iron. And I actually think that that's the mistake that's made, right? Because then I hear on the other side, like, I'm constipated, Erica. Oh my gosh, what can I do? And it's like, you need to take a low, if you're going to take iron, take a lower dose. And it has to do with what we started our conversation with, cellular uptake.
Yep. Well, and it's like you said, though, with any supplement, when you're introducing something to your body, you need to start low and slow.
Yeah.
And work your way up if you need to. And it's so important too for vegans and vegetarians, because we have, there's 2 types of iron. We have our heme iron, which comes from like our red meat and our animal sources, and then our non-heme iron, which comes from our vegetarian sources. But people don't realize non-heme iron, the bioavailability and the amount we actually absorb is significantly lower than those heme iron sources. So it's not like a 1-to-1 source ratio, like, oh, well, these sources have iron, these vegetarian sources have iron, and I'm taking in just as much as I would from an animal source. Well, that's something too. It's like, most people don't think about that absorption factor as well. Like, if, everyone's body also absorbs things differently, and depending on how well your body's actually working. And that's where we're talking about omega-3s, right? Like, we want things to get into our cells. We want those nutrients to be able to get in, and, anything we can do to support that. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like, starting low and slow and working your way up, and not starting with a high dose, especially with iron. Because like we talked about constipation, like that's one of the number 1 side effects of iron supplementation. But that's where too, if you're taking it as part of like a multivitamin, you're fine, but if you're taking it standalone, you really want to monitor it.
Yeah. And you can get low dose standalones, but I've seen way too many women get either prescribed or recommended a high dose. And I'm like, no, you should be taking like 10% of that amount. And let's actually see if your body can take up that 10% amount first before we go and shove such a high dose of iron at you. So anyway, off of our little iron tangent. Thank you so much, Kate. This is like so informative, and hopefully will help everyone just, connect the dots even more for their own health journey that everybody is on. So if you have any last things you want to share, and then can you also share with everyone where they can find you, reach out to you if they want to for any questions?
Yeah, no, Erica, this has been great. And like I was saying before we even went on, like, I just feed off other people's energy, and I just appreciate your energy and how much you geek out about this stuff as well.
I love it. Yeah, I love geeking out on all this. It's fun.
No, it is. It's so much fun. But yeah, to find us. So on social media, we're at Nordic Naturals. Also, I want to give you a resource, especially we talked a lot about pre and postnatal. We have a fabulous site. It's it's within our Nordic Naturals site, but it's called Healthy Science, and it's from Nordic Naturals, but there's amazing articles. I mean, we have one, I wrote one on supplements that vegans and vegetarians need, like if they should take a multivitamin. So we have one there. Then we also have why it's important to take DHA during pregnancy and for infants after. So if you're looking for more information like that, definitely head there. And then if you want to follow me personally, I'm at Kate Turner _RD on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate. This has been so fun.
Yeah, thank you.